again. I'm Eric with Smart Pot Fabric Planters, back with another great episode of the Growing Revolution. And our guest this week is Paul Meehan. He's the president of Natchez Tree Company in Lamar, Mississippi. And he's got a very efficient tree farm where they're using our root control bags for great root development and an easier harvest and transportation. So, Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Eric, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for making the time. Definitely appreciate it. So, unlike many tree farmers, you're not a multi-generational operation. Can you explain what you were doing in life prior to starting up your company and why you got into the industry in the first place?
Yeah, so I guess to jump right into things, I have zero formal training in horticulture, forestry, agriculture, or anything like that. I have a marketing and supply chain degree from the University of Tennessee, and after school, went into sales, primarily technology and software. I spent 3 years in New York City doing software sales, and then moved back home to Nashville and was doing healthcare technology sales. And it was great. I was making a comfortable living. I was pretty good at what I did, and I enjoyed the people I worked with. But at the end of the day, it just wasn't as fulfilling as I had hoped in a career. And sort of my whole life, I've been really interested in the outdoors and landscape, trees, things of that nature. And it was actually kind of a joke in the office that I was a big tree guy. So I could name all the trees in the parking lot, or if someone had a photo of something, I could say, hey, yeah, that's a tulip poplar, or that's a live oak, or that's a hackberry, whatever it was. So it was kind of a little bit of a joke. And, I guess at the time, I didn't realize this until I was, well into my career, that your average people you're working with don't know the difference between a red oak and a white oak, or even what an oak is, the difference between an oak and a maple. So this is all kind of shocking to me that people did not know all this stuff that was going on around them. It was just, that's a tree or that's a shrub. So one day, I was managing a team, a sales team, and one of the guys that I was working with said, "Oh, that's funny. You're a tree guy. My girlfriend's father is the owner of," and I won't mention the name of the farm, is a member of an owner of this farm. And I said, "Wow, that's interesting." And after we talked, I looked up this farm online, and looking at it on Google Images and pulled up the Google satellite map, I was like, "Wow, this is incredible." This is a pretty substantial farm I was looking at. It was probably 1,000 acres in production. It was outside of Nashville, kind of in that McMinnville area. And just looking at it, it was rows and rows of different shades of green and they had a lot of flowering trees and fruit trees and the rolling hills. It kind of looked like a vineyard, but of trees. And that kind of stuck out to me. I was like, wow, I've never really thought about where all these trees come from that are at garden centers and nurseries, or are being supplied to these huge developments and communities and projects. So I kind of started doing some research on my own, and instead of doing my normal sales stuff and my normal cold calling and email outreach and meeting with clients, I spent a whole week cold calling and cold emailing tree farms around the country. Which, my actual sales productivity went down, but my, learning about trees and operational stuff and, kind of this whole new world, I was just obsessed with. Many of the farmers that I actually got in touch with were shocked that someone like me would be interested in learning what they do. And I think that initially was my foot into the industry. These guys were not, they weren't taken aback. They didn't feel like I was someone trying to steal all their information. I was someone genuinely interested in what they did, and a complete outsider, what they did. And then if it was even possible for someone like me to come in and do this. And the resounding answer was that I got from a lot of these farmers was you can absolutely do this. You can absolutely learn this, but you're going to have to be really smart at it. There's a lot of ways that this cannot work, and you need to keep it a narrow focus. You need to be really good at what you do, and you need to go with that and scale it. So I asked tons of questions. I probably built a network of that first week of me cold calling farms. So of the 100 calls and 100 emails I sent out to farms across the country, I heard back probably from 10 of those guys. And probably 5 or 6 of those sort of became my mentors and my insiders on the industry, and helped guide me, into what Natchez Tree Company is now. They told me a lot of their pitfalls, what they wish they hadn't done, and also things that they wished they did. And high caliper was something that came up. My initial questioning was, what mode of production would you use if you could start from scratch? Was it balled and burlapped, or was it true hard-sided plastic containers? And doing the research, you can find all this information online about both those growing methods. And there's obvious pros and obvious cons for both of those. And farms make it work. But one thing I kept hearing from all of these farms that agreed to talk to me was, they started mentioning, hey, there's this grow bag, this in-ground container, or, you could even do it above ground. And I've kind of looked into it, but we've been doing balled and burlap for the last 30 years. And, my staff's really comfortable with it. And, we've got a book of business. And some of them mentioned high caliper by name, and others would just say, there's fabric containers out there, or, different modes of growing. And they'd kind of describe essentially what high caliper has. I started doing a bunch of research, that kind of shifted my research from balled and burlapped and hard-sided containers to high caliper. And that kind of opened up a whole, slew of potential issues I saw that kind of seemed like high caliper might be able to fix. I saw some major issues in starting a business in a profitable tree farm. One of those being, with balled and burlap, you can only harvest your trees, at most half the year, if you're lucky. The window for harvesting is so short. And if you've already got all these variables involved with growing a tree, and then you're telling me you can only harvest it during this small window, that was something it was a tough pill for me to swallow. And when I saw that high caliper, it's this year-round harvest, and the ease of harvest, that was something that really kind of caught my eye, because that seemed to be the major issue for these balled and burlap guys. And all of a sudden, you've got this product where that's not an issue at all. So it was things like that, getting to know the product, started making me think, why is nobody else doing this? And I'd ask my group of farmer friends the same questions, the ones who told me to look at high caliper. I kept asking them, why aren't you doing this? No one's doing this. And they kept kind of saying the same things over and over. It was, things are working out good for us right now. We've been doing it for X amount of years, and we cannot afford to change right now. But if we could, we would. So I kind of took it upon myself to deepen my search, to try and find the small amount of farmers who are using the high caliper grow bags for in-ground tree production. And I actually got in touch with 2 of them, and they're probably 2 of the most influential tree bag growers in the country. And one of them I got very close with, Eric Hall, and really modeled our operation and how we grow trees off of a lot of Eric's advice and sort of this model that he created. I saw exactly what he was doing, and he shared with me the success they were having. And that's all I needed to hear for me to say, I'm all in. This is how we're going to do it.
Nice. So Eric was working at his at the tree farm he was at before starting his consulting business when you originally met with him?
Yeah, and the way I got in touch with Eric is I had reached out to High Caliper because I saw this ad for the Monarch Auger, an automated way to install these grow bags in the field. with just a skid steer and auger, and it's a pretty unique but simple setup. And they introduced me to Eric. I asked Eric, my initial questions was, hey, tell me about this auger. How much does it cost? Tell me what it can do, all the basic questions. And that kind of led us down more conversation on production and starting a tree farm. And one thing led to another. And before you know it, I was down at his tree farm visiting and checking out what he had. And when I got there, I was just in awe, not only of the farm itself, but the amount of trees that they were moving, how good their trees looked, and also how small of a production staff he had. It was almost hard to believe, because many of these other farms are using, they're doing 100 acres in production. They're throwing out, we've got 20, 30 members on the team. Eric's over there with a team of somewhere between 5 and 10, and at times even less. So when I saw that, when you're looking at operational costs, labor is a huge, huge factor in that. Not only is he much less on the labor side, but he's also growing his product 2 to 3 times faster. So seeing the farm in person, I was just thinking, this is crazy. This is how we're going to do it.
Right. Yeah, Eric, he's a super smart guy. We actually got to interview him for a previous podcast episode. And yeah, it seems like he has the formula that if I was starting a tree farm, I would definitely lean on him and sponge off all of his knowledge, definitely. Eric's been obviously a big fan of the root control bags for years and passed that on to you. How has the root control bag helped your tree farm be more efficient versus traditional farming methods? I mean, I know the answer, but people who are watching don't.
Well, there's a number of things. I could probably give you 100 bullet points, and some of it's getting kind of into the nitty gritty. And I'd say the most important thing about the grow bag from a production standpoint is really the ease of harvest. I would say there's kind of a decent amount of work on the front end, but the ability to, when a customer calls you and says, I need 1 willow oak or I need 300 willow oaks, we just go out in the field and we pop a tree out of the ground and we put it directly onto a trailer. It's that simple. And if you tell someone who's not in the industry, they probably think that's how it's done everywhere. But for whatever reason, it's not. And with other modes of growing, that's just not a reality. That's not that's not, it needs to be pre-dug. It needs to be hardened off. It needs to be, there's this whole long laundry list of things that people are even reading the phases of the moon for some of this stuff. But with the high caliper grow bag, it's just the ease of use. Pop it out of the ground, put it on a trailer. And then from a customer standpoint, this goes back to my sales background. It's, what's in it for a customer? A customer doesn't really necessarily care how easy it was for us to harvest this tree or for us to produce this grade 1 tree. From their standpoint, the benefits are just, even that much more extreme. The number one, survival, when it comes to survival, number one is survival. And the grow bag's unmatched when it comes to survival rate. So, a customer can get a tree that has 95 to maybe even 100% of its original root mass in that container. So it's a tree that doesn't need some whole rejuvenation period. It's ready to produce right then and there. So survival's number one. And then number two, for a customer, we can fit close to double the amount of trees on a trailer with having a much smaller root ball. It's also a lot easier for the customer to handle that root ball. They need machinery, but it's nothing extreme. They're not moving 600-pound root balls. They're moving 300-pound root balls. So there's a number of things that brings benefits to our customers. So it's kind of a two-way street.
Yeah, and then with being more efficient, you're able to be better with your profit margins, and you're able to keep your prices, competitive, but still make money at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So I've heard that now, how many years has your tree farm been in operation?
We just hit 4 years. I think it's this week. So
Yeah.
4 years. We've
Nice.
got 4 different crops now.
Congratulations.
Uh,
I've heard that you reached a profitability point much sooner than other tree farms would have. What would you attribute that to?
yeah. So there's a few things going on there, and it is pretty incredible when I tell other farms, that we're in our 4th year and we've already sold a good portion of our first 2 crops. We took a tree from a 3 or 5 gallon container. That's about, we buy in a lot of our baby trees, but that's a 3 or 5 gallon container. That's about a 5 foot tall tree. It kind of looks like a Charlie Brown tree. The diameter of the trunk's probably your pinky, about that size. We can take a tree that big and we can have it to 3-inch caliper in diameter, and probably a 15 to 20 foot tall tree in a matter of 2 to 3 years. And that is unheard of. And I guess the way we're able to do that, there's a number of different factors. There's a lot of things that have to go right. But with the high caliper grow bag, it all starts with the soil. The ability to use this container in the ground. We use Eric's Monarch auger. It'll auger the hole. We slide the fabric container into that hole, and then the auger drops that mineral soil back into the bag. During that process, we amend that native soil, and we amend it with, it's a chicken litter, pine bark, compost type amendment. We've got a whole prescription, and it all starts with the native soil. Where we're deficient in that native soil, we try to overcompensate for that in our compost pile. So if we're low in boron, or we're low in calcium or potassium or whatever it might be, we want our pile to have, the proper amount to even out once that's mixed in with the native soil. So that tree's able to start with the perfect soil, literally the perfect soil. And with that starting point, the tree is able to go from that container to that, dream soil that it's in, and really thrive. And, we're watering on top of that. We're fertilizing. We take numerous tissue samples throughout the year, and we're kind of pushing all the right buttons. We'll take a tissue sample in June. We'll take a tissue sample in August. We'll do soil samples in the off season, and we monitor a lot of these growing trends. We know that the amendments we put in that bag, to some extent, they're man-made. We're self-imposing this compost into this native soil. So those numbers get really high. As the growing season goes, they start to trickle off a little bit. And then we'll top dress and bring those numbers back up. But the combination of that, and then also with these trees being able to produce such a fibrous root system, we can fertilize such a small area. We're just fertilizing inside that container. We're not fertilizing the whole field. So from a cost standpoint, for each tree, I'm fertilizing 2 square feet. I'm not fertilizing, if it was in the ground, I'd be fertilizing, all around that tree and watering all around that tree. So it's really we're just worried about the soil that tree is coming in contact with. So,
yeah.
And then, from there, there's lots of pruning that goes on, and staking, and herbicides, fungicides. But the real core component of it is the container, the fibrous root system, and giving the tree what it needs from a nutritional standpoint. That's how we're able to get it there so quickly.
Yeah. When the more, you can get your plant to a optimal, perfect growing condition, the faster it's going to grow, the healthier it's going to be. And time is money in the agriculture industry. And the quicker you can get your product to harvest, the sooner you can get another plant back into the ground for the next round. Awesome.
And I will tell you, Eric, one of the issues, this is the main issue we had with our growing model, is we basically came from nothing to all of a sudden there's this farm that's got tons of trees. But over those 2 years of growing our first crop, we're just in production mode. We have 0 customers. And all of a sudden, with the flip of a switch, we go from 0 customers to having thousands of trees that need to move. So at one point, I was like, holy smokes, we grew these things way too fast. All of a sudden, I've got all this stuff I need to move. So I guess it's kind of a catch-22. But once, we've been able to build our customer base and all that. So now it's sort of, we're back into the mode of we've got customers who are saying, I need this. And we'll grow it as fast as we can to get it to you. But at first, it's kind of scary as a new business. You've got this product that's alive that could outgrow, the market that it's intended for. But that's just a testament to High Caliper. Is if you start using High Caliper, if you want to grow intensively, you better have some customers lined up to buy your product because it's going to come quick.
Yeah, you don't want to overgrow your trees, definitely by any means. And yeah, that's kind of interesting that for a couple of years you're just focused on growing, and then you get to a point it's like, all right, time to get into sales mode as well as growing. So, it is what it is, right?
Well, we've been very blessed.
Go ahead.
The customers, those first customers that we got, they're kind of the first customers, the first people to see our product. It was all about getting feedback from them. Some of them were not familiar at all with receiving trees grown in fabric containers. For some customers, there's this perception of, oh, well, I've only bought trees that are grown in a hard-sided container, or I've only bought balled and burlap trees. It seems like 8 out of the 10 customers didn't care at all. In fact, they viewed it as a positive. And those 2 out of 10 who were kind of skeptical or whatever reason, they eventually bought from us. And those customers that were the most skeptical are the customers that have become the best customers for us because they were really studying this thing. They really wanted to see how this worked. They were kind of, paying extra attention to this thing. And it kind of exceeded all expectations. So in the end, I had some hesitations about doing something that was a little different than the norm, but it really differentiated us. And it's been a huge positive and a huge selling point because there's a lot of farms out there, and us doing something a little different, sets us apart.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, what on your farm, what type of trees are you focused on growing, and what's your most popular tree variety?
Yeah, one area I didn't realize we were in such a good geographic location until we started selling trees and kind of understanding who our target customer really needs to be. Being just south of Memphis, I knew we'd make some sales in Memphis. And I knew Nashville would be a big customer, but I really didn't anticipate the Dallas-Fort Worth area. To me, that's 6-7 hours away. I thought that might be a little far, but, all of a sudden, that's where the majority of our trees are going. There's so much development in the state of Texas that there's not enough farms to supply the need. And we're viewed a lot of times as the closest farm outside of the state that has significant product to move. And there's a number of reasons why Texas is like that. It's got such a harsh condition to grow, poor soil. It's so hot in the summer. It's cold in the winter. But that's kind of turned into our little niche market is Dallas-Fort Worth. We've also started moving a lot of material to Houston. A market I would really like to get in is kind of that Midwest Chicago market. It's 8 hours north. But, it all ties into what trees you're growing and if those trees are popular in that area from a survival standpoint, and then also just from a popularity standpoint, what's being spec'd. To answer your question about what trees we're growing, we predominantly grow shade trees. So oaks, maples, elms. We grow some magnolias. We're in Mississippi, so we got to grow magnolias. We're the magnolia state. But our most popular selling trees right now are probably live oak, bur oak, Shumard oak, really that palette that sells to these Texas developers. That's kind of turned into our bread and butter. I would like to expand our market presence in some other species. in the next few years, we're going to get a little more involved in privacy trees, green giants, Nellie R. Stevens, stuff when people want a green wall, more residential type. But, things are going really good as is. I think if we can just keep adding to our palette, really doing nothing different, just adding some different plant material to the mix and different plants for different regions, I think we can really grow our footprint.
Nice. Now, I was looking on your website, and it said that you guys specialize in high grade trees. And I was wondering if you could just briefly explain what tree grading is and how that impacts your business and what you're doing to keep your trees in a high grade condition.
Yeah, so tree grading is kind of, as I like to put it, it's a gray area, and if I ask,
it's kind of subjective.
It's very subjective. And as an outsider, and just the way my brain works, I like things to be black and white, even though in business and, working with people, nothing is really black and white. There's a lot of gray area, and tree grading is one of those. That's something I kind of wrestled with, and something Eric really helped me with is, I'm obsessive when it comes to how our trees look. And
you want them to look perfect.
I want them to look perfect, but there's a difference between what I think is perfect and what a customer thinks is perfect. So one thing I wanted to do is really understand the grades and standards and how trees are graded. And really the authority on those grades and standards is Dr. Ed Gilman out of the University of Florida. He put together, and I haven't read the whole thing. It's 100, 200 pages long, but he put together a whole grading system. And I challenge a lot of our customers to understand that grading system, because at the end of the day, that's what the architect's going to be looking at, depending on, the project and there's different factors involved. But when we grow our trees, our goal is to have them as a Florida grade #1 tree. And a tree that's not grade 1 does not get on a truck and does not go to a customer. But if we've got that grade 1 standard, which is, a tree limbed up to X amount of height, central leader up till the top, 3/4 of the tree, evenly branched, vertical branching, full structure, it's pretty straightforward from a production standpoint. If we know what that is, if all our team members know what that is. Now, I've got 20,000 trees out in the field right now. Not every one of them is grade 1, but probably 90 to 95% are. And that other 5% are trees that just aren't going to make it to market. But yeah, the standard, you talk to different people have different things they're thinking of. But if you can just keep it in that grade 1 standard, everybody seems to be happy. That a grade 1 tree is pretty much universally accepted.
Yeah, I was doing some research into the grading standards last week, in preparation for this interview, and I couldn't tell a ton of difference between, the top grade and then the one below it. They seemed like, gray area, kind of like what you were saying. So, yeah, as long as you're aiming for that second best, I don't even know how anyone gets that top grade. Like, you got to have a fake tree or something.
Right. Yeah. Then there's Florida Fancy, which is the top of the line. You'd be out there with kitchen scissors, up there.
Yeah, like you just bubble wrap your trees so nothing lands on it.
And we actually do have a lot of the trees that go on trailers are Florida Fancy trees. I'm not going to advertise that all our trees are Florida Fancy. But if you're getting a semi-truck load of 90 trees, there's going to be some Florida Fancies in there. But the grade 1 is really what people want and what people need and what's expected for a high-end project.
Nice. Paul, how do you see the farm doing in the next 5 to 10 years? Are you expanding? Are you keeping things somewhat as is? How do you view the future?
Well, every year is kind of like adding another portion of the farm. We started out with 15 acres. Year 2, we added another 10 acres. Year 3, we added another 15. This last year, we planted another 10. And then the next year, we're going to be planting another, 10 to 15, somewhere in the middle. Now, the goal is, I've got 20,000 trees out right now. The goal is when one phase is being harvested and sold, we're going to start coming back in there and replanting that. So right now we're kind of trying to stabilize the ship. I've got 20,000-ish trees out there. We're probably going to sell 5,000 to 6,000 trees this year. We're also going to be planting another 5,000 or 6,000. So right now we've kind of built it up and we're kind of in the stabilizing mode.
Nice.
One of the things that was hard for us though is for the first 2 years we were just in production mode. Growing trees, pruning trees, watering, really just catering to those trees. 2 years ago, you enter in sales, and all of a sudden, not only are you taking care of trees, but you're harvesting trees, you're wrapping trees, you're loading trucks with trees. It's a whole nother business segment. So this next year is kind of going to be the perfect storm of having a full pallet of trees ready to go in all species and all sizes that we grow. So we're going to have probably, I'd say, somewhere between 5 to 10 production members. And then we've got 2 or 3 office staff. But I say 5 to 10 because it's just kind of, we've never had this much product being sold that we're anticipating to sell this year. So I'm kind of hesitant on a number to say. But I think right now the key is to stabilize. And then I think in the next year or two, we're going to start growing some more numbers in a lot of the species we already grow, but also growing some new species for other markets that we want to get into.
Yeah, nice. And I've heard from other tree farmers that it's a terrible idea to grow your field too fast because you never want to have, a huge excess of supply that you can't move. Only grow what you know you're going to be able to move.
Right. You'd rather be, and that's something, you've probably heard that from Eric Hall, you'd rather be sold out of something than stuck with something. So we've kind of been testing a lot of these numbers. I know right now kind of the magic number of live oak trees I need to grow every year. In the first year, I didn't grow nearly enough because those things sold out like that. But, I don't want to grow 30 times that number because then I'll probably have, way too many. So it's kind of finding that right, that right number. So a lot of times when we start growing a tree for the first time, we'll start out at a small amount just to make sure the demand we think is there. And then a lot of times we'll also bounce these ideas off customers and, see what they're planting.
Yeah. Like ask the customer, hey, what would you like to buy from me? What do you want me to grow?
And that's the best type of relationship with a customer is a customer that you can call and ask those questions to. And also a customer that really values you asking them about their business and what they would like to have. So, that's kind of the full understanding. He understands me. I understand him. We're a perfect fit for working together. Yeah.
It's more of a relationship than a transactional deal.
Right.
Paul, this has really been a great interview, and I've learned a lot about your operation, and I guess just more on tree farming in general. How can people find you online and social media type stuff?
Yeah, so our website, natcheztreeco.com. We've got good photos, some videos on there of the farm. And then, of course, Instagram is so popular right now. I think Instagram is the easiest to get to know somebody. We're natchez.tree.co on Instagram. So for those listening, give us a follow. We'd love to keep you updated on things that are going on at the farm. And then, of course, we love having visitors out here. The best way for people to really understand the farm from a production standpoint and then also get to know our trees is coming out here and, getting a tour of the farm and getting your hands dirty.
Which I need to do myself. We were supposed to do that late last year, I believe, but the planets weren't aligned for us. So hopefully within the next 6 to 12 months, I'd love to see your farm in person.
Yeah, and for all the high caliper and Growing Revolution fans, when Eric's out here, we'll get a video of him installing some grow bags, so he can put his money where his mouth is.
Heck yeah, I'm down. Put me to work. Paul, thank you so much for your time. This has been a really good interview, and looking forward to seeing you again in person down the road.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Eric. I appreciate you hosting me.